MIDDLEKAUFF! Hey!
Now that Sean Payton is retiring for the time being, Green Bay's got some things to figure out. Tampa's got some things to figure out. Dallas got some things to figure out. Arizona got some things to figure out. Philly's got some things to figure out. Those are the other playoff teams this year in the NFC. New Orleans has some things to figure out. Minnesota has some things to figure out. Washington and Seattle have things to figure out. Atlanta has things to figure out. So does Chicago. So does Carolina. So do the New York Giants. And so do the Detroit Lions. That's the NFC. Now, you could argue, well, the Niners have something to figure out a quarterback. True. But these guys are just, are Kyle and McVay just going to meet in the NFC Championship? Like, I don't know. What would you say? How many next years?
Well, it sure feels like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are going to play each other a lot in the playoffs, and these two guys have a huge leg up in the NFC because when you look at, to me, Sean Payton was easily one of the elite coaches he's accomplished more than either one of these guys. And let's face it, he's had some epic games with both of them. Didn't he play one of them in an NFC Championship game where, call went against his way to help the Rams? I remember him playing.
Call went against his way against the Niners as well. There probably should have been an Ahmad Brooks pass interference, remember, in New Orleans.
And wouldn't you say in Kyle's tenure, probably the most exciting regular season game he's played in beside the Rams was against Sean Payton in New Orleans, 2 years ago in 2019.
Yep.
Well, I would say the other two.
Kyle has played in some just insane games.
The other two big-time coaches are 70 years old, Pete Carroll and Bruce Arians. Now those guys are good, and Carroll kicks Kyle's ass, and Bruce Arians, they haven't played yet the last couple of years with Brady, it'd be a hard fucking game. Like, it'd be a coin flip, whatever. The Tampa could easily win. So as long as those two guys are there, they're big time. But besides, what guy under 70 is keeping these? Some of those teams you listed, guys, don't even have coaches. Minnesota, New York, Chicago hasn't hired a coach yet.
New Orleans?
The Saints, it feels like the Panthers are going to fire that guy. They already hate each other. And again, back to the two old guys, what's the over-under on Pete Carroll and Bruce Arians coaching? 2.5 years?
It feels like Bruce. Did you see Bruce said he might take back play calling duties if
Leftwich leaves?
If Leftwich leaves, but yeah, even if Tom retires, they got some work. They got to find a quarterback.
They'd have some problems, and then you would say the Cowboys aren't going away because they have so much talent, but massive coaching advantage.
And Sean Payton could be coaching them in a year, right?
Yeah, you just got to hope he goes to the AFC.
But I also think if Sean Payton also could do TV for $17 million and find out it's a good lifestyle and not come back, because he's doing TV. Well, we'll get to Sean Payton.
Couldn't you see him doing it for like 3 years and coming back? It's not a guarantee one.
No, I think it's hard to just do one.
Well, once he gets the cash and kind of relaxes and gets.
But Jerry could always be like, "Hey, man, look, I'm 79 or whatever, 73 however old Jerry is."
The one thing though is when you're a coach, it's an addiction that you don't shake. And he mentioned it so to me, if he comes back in the NFC, that's a huge backswing. But I text you this today. If I was Jed and I was Stan, and both these guys got big extensions, I would offer them both 10-year contracts at fucking $20 million a year. Or whatever that would get them to sign the contract.
Oh,
what is that?
$20 million a year?
Well, why the fuck who cares? It's a line item.
Yeah, but you don't pay what you don't pay what you don't have to pay. But
when you realize the competition, I got to play Dan Campbell and whoever the fuck the Bears are going to hire, and David Tepper and his idiot Matt Rule who belongs at Baylor. You just canvas the landscape. You have such a competitive advantage. Such a competitive advantage. Now, if Carroll and Arians were 60, it'd be a problem, but they're 70. They're old. They're really old.
But beyond old, their teams are not. I think I like Bruce Arians, but he is not in terms of running a full operation. I do not believe he is as good as McVay or Shanahan.
I would agree, but if he has a good team and they played either one in the playoffs, they can easily win.
That's true.
That's, to me, where it's like, if I play Matt Rule, I'm sending the Uber to pick up Matt Rule so I can kick the shit out of him. I would not feel good, and I don't think any Niner fan would, or I don't know if the Rams fans exist. Sean McVay wouldn't feel good if he plays Pete Carroll or he plays Bruce Arians in a playoff game, meaning they have a good team, right? Like Sean McVay, they were They had the competitive fear of playing that squad going into that game, as they
and they would have if substitute Tom Brady with a top 15. If Kirk Cousins was Bruce's quarterback, you'd still be alarmed.
Yeah, to me, like I just can't. All these other guys, I can't put in the crew. Like I like Nick Sirianni. He doesn't have a quarterback that can throw, and his defensive coordinator, while everyone thinks he's the next great head coach, defense is terrible. So you just. Like, is Nick Sirianni the only guy that you're like, well, this guy could eventually be a pretty good coach? I mean, he had an impressive year, but like you just canvas the landscape. It's pretty nuts how shitty the NFC is relative to the AFC. Like, imagine if you're just like the Ravens. You're like, fuck, this is, or even like Tomlin. Like, how do we just compete again?
Yeah,
at the highest level, not just.
That's
NFC is a pretty good spot to just get to 9 wins for some of these teams.
That's where Sean, it's pretty alarming what the situation was in New Orleans. He took a look at the NFC, at his division, right? He said it. Like, looking at the division, I'm thinking like, look at the division. What are you talking about looking at the division?
Oh, did he not try to act like it's wide open for our guys? Or was he trying to act like it's hard?
I thought he was acting like it's hard. Are you saying he was kind of acting like they can bounce back real fast?
That's what I thought he meant. Like, look at the division, put in Dennis Allen, who I think would be good, and we'll just hit the ground running.
You might be right about that. And it's not that crazy. You say it about an individual team. You go look at this team's individual situation, but then you just look around. That's where the NFC West is so unique. Even without an elite head coach, Arizona, we'll see how Kyler's next 2 and 3 and 4 years play out. But they've got enough at quarterback to scare you in a given year. But these two guys, they are what Harbaugh, because he just doesn't have the staying power, and Pete Carroll maybe could have been. The difference is both of these guys have their finger on the most important button, right? Pete and Jim were partly about the operation. Kyle and Sean McVay also are. But if you said you're going to lose all your coaches, you got to start from scratch, just you, I still think they'd be pretty good because they are pretty good.
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately, Jim, Pete, but these are the offensive. These two guys have the number one skill you want in any coach, the most important skill if you can get it, which is the ability to elevate a team without a great quarterback. They both went to the Super Bowl with guys that one of them already replaced and the other one is about to replace.
Well, doesn't it feel like
with Goff and Garoppolo?
Wouldn't it be one of the biggest stories? I mean, obviously we talk about it, but just in football, if it was ever announced in the foreseeable future that Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan are going to give up play calling duties, does that feel like that feels impossible to happen, doesn't it? In the foreseeable future,
I mean, it would take a stroke. Like, why would they do that?
They wouldn't. They
don't want to do it. The person paying them doesn't want them to do it. What would they do with their time? It'd be like Kyle's like, I'm giving up play calling duties and I'm going to run leads. Okay,
you know who's been calling plays the whole time, and it wears you out. Is the guy that just retired,
Sean Payton? Yeah, yeah. Well, didn't you say that Kyle said after the Packer game he liked the block punt touchdown because it meant he didn't have to call plays?
Yeah, I think that was more alluding to like, I don't fucking know if we can get in, right?
Yeah. That's where Andy's like, I do.
Wayne had been like, I'll go special from the 5-yard line. Go deep.
I'll call the play, but whatever you guys want to do once you're out there is cool too.
Yeah, just go deep, guys.
Another genius call by me, Andy Reid.
I think it's easier. Sean Payton mentioned this, and I think it's way easier for Andy to like let the guys cook once he trusts them. I bet Kyle and Sean talk differently because I was watching Sean thinking it's going to be interesting one day to see Kyle when he's like 52 years old. Right? Or Sean McVay when he's 44 years old. Like, they'll talk like back in my day, but they were so young and they still will be young, right? Andy, it's been so easy for him to hand over the reins because of his the trust level in his star player, starting with his quarterback and the 2-star, skill guys. I would imagine it's never even been close any guy he's ever had. And he's had great players, he's had great teams, but this level of innate trust, Kyle hasn't quite. I think Kyle's finding that in Deebo Samuel and in George Kittle. Like he will at the biggest times, and he's done this consistently, dial up plays for those guys. His trust level as a play caller is highest in the history of his life with those guys. Just like Sean McVay, I think, has found that in Cooper Kupp. Like when all else fails, I'm going to 10 if I'm Sean McVay. When all else fails, I'm going to 19 or 85. I'm calling that play. And I mean, Andy, when all else fails, it's like Patrick just knows to do that now, right? And he can just, if you notice in that clip, Andy wasn't talking to anybody. He was just letting those guys be, right? I mean, Kelsey was talking to him. They were about to go back on the field with 13 seconds left. There's a level of trust you get, probably happens when you're a parent, right? Once your kid's like 28, it doesn't happen when they're 14. It builds up over time, and you just know.
I think it's the result. That is what cannot be faked. And you can only gain through experience, and you can't rush the experience.
Kyle doesn't have that with Jimmy, obviously, right?
No, but Kyle does have the experience of knowing the best way to try and manage him. But you're right. No, he does not have that trust. And McVay didn't have that trust with Goff. And maybe one day he'll have it with Stafford. He clearly trusts him more. But, Andy and Patrick Mahomes have been through it together and both come out on the other side, and each one has caught the other during a trust fall. Like they
win and losses, right?
Win and losses. And part of it is once you've won, I think it just takes a little bit of the burden off of you. Once you've won the championship, now you can kind of, really explore the space a little bit more. You're freer.
But
you're
so
freer.
Isn't that what I was saying a little bit about, like, they don't talk about it like we all talk about it, but they do feel once Kyle or Sean eventually wins a championship, would they be as tight on the sideline in some of these games, or is it just a little looser?
I don't know. I mean, you think about Payton.
Sean looked pretty tight on Sunday, didn't he?
McVay looked very aged. Yes, McVay looked tight.
He looked like he was watching. This is going to be the worst loss of my life.
Yes.
Right?
He was watching a horrible, horrible movie. That's where Sean Payton won one championship as a head coach, kicked an onside kick in it, and not at the end of the game, right? In the Super Bowl. Like, I do think Kyle kind of calls games already as if he's won it. Like, I think I think when he calls games, he's pretty loose. I think the areas where show up as tight, it has to do with Garoppolo. It doesn't have to do with Kyle. I think growing up in the game and being Mike's son has made him that.
I don't know if I'd totally agree. I think sometimes when they let it loose, they have no that's their only option. If they're down 7 with a minute left, no timeouts, like that Rams drive. I think sometimes do they always? That's where I think Andy's changed a lot. Once he got Patrick, he's just much more fuck it, pedal the metal, go kill shots, and it I'd say 99% of the time it's worked for them. Kyle, a couple times, like when you're up, 17-7. And part of this might be Jimmy, but part of it is like he still has something to lose. I don't feel like he's just letting it loose always. I think you do that more when you're winning than when you're losing because you have no shot. That's your only option when you're losing. It's can you play? And that's where Sean Payton and Andy, I would say, Sean Payton for the last decade and Andy for these last 3 years. When you watch his team and they're up 20-3. It doesn't look any different if they're down 20-3, right? And Kyle's teams do look a little different sometimes.
But I think it's because he has to manage every play. He has to manage it. Steve Kerr, like, what's the best play? Give the ball to Steph. You don't have to manage every moment the way that I think Shanahan does and the way McVay did. Yeah, but I also think, to use Payton as an example, and this is, I think, partly your point, is like they will only get better, and they're so young. They will only get better with time, these two guys, because they've already done enough. Now, neither's won a championship, but they've done enough to get themselves so much leeway with their owners, with their fan bases, with their organizations, with their players, right? And I think that's important, is to early on kind of create a lot of runway for you. So you're not in win or get fired year by year 2. And both those guys have now established themselves that way. And they're going to be part of this game specifically, like the tightness that you'll feel in this game is they're going to be doing it against each other. And while they're doing it, kind of knowing, like, I am facing the best right now, right? And, we'll see. I mean, whoever wins this game will be lucky if they end up facing Zach Taylor, not Andy Reid in the Super Bowl.
Well, Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan is guaranteed to go to their second Super Bowl. Like, Sean Payton is a massive story today. He went to one Super Bowl. Now, he won it, but he's been trying to get back there for a decade and had some great teams. Went to one. One of these two guys is going to be representing the NFC for the second time in either 3 or 4 years. That's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. right, in itself. And I think that's where sometimes, like, I know in golf, it's like you only get credit for your winning. But, like, if the top fives, I was on this texting with someone about, like, Ernie Els, and you just look at all his top fives in his career. He won 4 majors. The guy top fived in U.S. Opens and British Opens, I think like a combined 12 times. You don't get as much credit for that, but it's really a remarkable accomplishment. It's why once you win it and you have all these pelts on the wall, it's why Andy gets so much credit now for all those championship games, right? Because he has the Super Bowl. Well, but if you don't get the Super Bowl, you're just kind of known as the guy that just top fives in a lot of majors or gets a lot of Super Bowls. So this back to the pressure thing. Whoever wins this game and ups their level of hype, because the hype machine on both of them is really high. But the winning, we'll talk about the second Super Bowl, they're going to have the opportunity to kind of like change the course of their life, right? At a very, one at 42 or one at 36 years old, because they'll be talked about completely different for the next 5 years, and both of them will be considered in the quote-unquote coaching draft that never happens as top 5 locks moving forward, right?
Yeah, win or lose.
Win or lose the Super Bowl. But
that's what this year has done for Kyle. I think.
You think Sean had already
Sean's already there because he this year helped him.
He won a playoff game last year.
Good. Yeah, and with Goff, and I jokingly after the game, after the Packer game, tweeted like lifetime contract for Kyle, because I'm not giving anybody a lifetime contract, right? But I had a few people, multiple people actually reply like, "Let me see him in the Super Bowl first." I'm like, okay.
Well, you looked at me when I was crazy when I said 10 for 20.
Well, $20 million a year is just so far above what you'd have to pay somebody if you gave him a 10-year contract right now.
Well, Sean Payton's getting $17 million. Pete Carroll's like $17 million. Belichick's like 25.
Yeah,
you're right.
I'm just
okay,
saying,
10 for 15.
I'm giving you the security of 10 years. I don't have to pay you $20 million a year right now. That's why I looked like
10 for 15.
Sure, but again, why would I go to 10 when I can pay you 6? I just re-up you every 3 years, every 6-year contract, right?
But you just said lifetime contract. Don't we want to give you guys?
My point is, you just know you've got a guy, so you can give him a lifetime contract. You don't have to. I wasn't really going to give him one, but the idea that like he has to prove something to me in the Super Bowl this year, like I'm pretty confident, even if he were to lose a lead in the fourth quarter. I've seen him win enough of these games at this point. He's won a lot of them too, right? Games that he had the lead, games he didn't have the lead, comebacks with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like I've seen the proof. But ultimately they're putting all the work in so they can win the trophy. Kyle's been so close. So close. Sean's been so close. That's where I think so much of the pressure on the two of them is probably also self-imposed. Like they're clearly both grinders. And they have rivalry now with one another in the division.
What's worse, losing a Super Bowl where your defense only allows 13 points, losing a Super Bowl where you have a 10-point lead heading in the fourth quarter?
Losing a Super Bowl with a 10-point lead.
Yeah. Because the Rams it never felt like they were going to win that game, right? Like looking back, I remember sitting on the couch thinking it was a boring game.
Nope.
Like,
somehow Jared Goff, this is not the guy we watched all year.
Niners had a 10-point lead.
Yeah. Now,
Not
both of them lost
to
to 10. Belichick and Brady, and the other one lost to Mahomes and Reid.
Right. I do think it matters who you lose to, for sure. Like that's you can hold your head high.
Yeah. Or as high as you could hold it.
Yeah, like, I mean, Rocco gets to tell his friends till the day he dies, like, yeah, Tiger hit the fucking 2 putts. What was I going to do, right?
It was just legendary.
Yeah. It's like
one of the most legendary moments. That's what it took to beat me.
Who beat you? Oh, Bill and Brady on their last Super Bowl ever together. They're 6th.